Welcome back to the beginner's course for consultants. Now, in the previous two lessons, I explained how to run an implementation project, how to run a training project, but there is also a type of a project that is very interesting for consultants, and this is internal audit or a second party or supplier audit. And there are not many consultants that are doing these kind of audits, but this is a very interesting, I would say, business opportunity, because if nothing else, this is a recurring activity that you can do for a client. Now, the problem is that audit projects are very different from implementation or training projects. So in this lesson today, I'll explain what types of audits exist and what are the business opportunities for consultants for each of these types. Also, what are the qualifications for a person to perform an audit work? And finally, what are the 7 steps that you have to do to complete an audit process? So after you watch this video, you'll have a clear idea on how to organize an audit project in such a way that you are not missing anything important and that you are doing this thoroughly. Okay, let's go first through what types of audits exist. There are first party audits, second party audits, and third party audits. First party audits are internal audits. This is where a company has to organize its own internal audit, and that the results of this audit are reported only to the company itself, meaning to the management within the company. Now, these internal audits are excellent opportunity for consultants because very often smaller companies that want to get certified do not have their own resources, meaning that they do not have their own employees who can perform internal audit, and they are looking for someone external to perform internal audit for them, and consultants are actually a perfect match for this kind of work, because they do have the knowledge on how to perform this kind of an audit. And you can also take a look at my advanced course for consultants, because there I speak about these business opportunities for consultants to actually perform this continuous work. Now, if you're working as a consultant for this company, then you might actually be in a conflict of interest for doing also the internal audit works. So for example, if you're helping a company to implement ISO 42001, then you cannot actually be also the internal auditor for 42001, because then you would actually audit your own work. To overcome this problem, if you were implementing this standard for a client, then you can ask your colleague to do the internal audit, and in this way you actually avoid this conflict of interest. Another way to avoid this conflict of interest is that you actually complete your implementation work, as a consultant for this client, and then in the next cycle, after 1 year, then you actually start doing the internal audit, because if in the meanwhile you were not engaged with this client, then there will be no more of this conflict of interest. Second party audits are audits of suppliers of this company that is implementing a particular framework or a standard. And this is also an excellent business opportunity for consultants, because some frameworks or regulations like NIS2 and DORA, these are 2 cybersecurity frameworks in Europe. So these regulations actually require companies that must comply with them to be very careful with their suppliers, and in some cases actually they require an audit of supplier. So if these organizations do not have internal resources to perform these supplier audits, then you as a consultant could be a perfect choice to actually help them out with these audits. Now, a good thing is that there is no conflict of interest if you're already working on the implementation. So here you can actually work in parallel and help a company implement a standard or regulation, and also at the same time work on second party audits for this client. Now, third party audits are certification audits, and consultants cannot act as certification bodies, which means that this is at least not directly a business opportunity for consultants. However, I know lots of consultants that actually work for certification bodies, and some of them see this as a very good revenue source, but some of them also see this as a good learning opportunity, because if you work through various auditing projects as a certification auditor, then you can actually learn how particular parts of the standard can be implemented in different circumstances. So it could be also a very good learning opportunity for a consultant. Okay, in the rest of this video, I'll focus only on first party and second party audits, so internal audits and supplier audits. Now, what kind of qualifications are needed for a person, for a consultant to become an auditor, internal auditor or a supplier auditor? So first you need to have an excellent understanding of the framework, for example, of NIS NIS2 or DORA or ISO 27001. And second, you need to have an excellent understanding and skills in auditing, so how to perform an audit. And typically consultants can prove these two qualifications in two ways. One way is to show in your CV that you have, I would say, a large experience with a particular standard and a long experience in performing certification or any other types of audits. Or a second way would be actually that you go for courses that teach you these two things. And these courses are typically called internal auditor courses or lead auditor courses. And you have these kind of courses for all kinds of ISO standards for, let's say, ISO 27001. So this would be ISO 27001 internal auditor course, ISO 27001 lead auditor course, and so on for any other ISO standard. And those courses will teach you everything you need to know about the particular standard, and will also teach you about the audit techniques. Now, internal auditor courses typically do not go into such depth of auditing techniques, whereas lead auditor courses go into much more depth when it comes to auditing. Now, let's see what are the steps to organize an internal audit or a supplier audit. So first of all, you have to check your client's internal documents. So let's say that you're doing an internal audit for ISO 9001. You have to check their internal audit procedure to see what are their, let's say, rules on how this internal audit needs to be performed. If you're performing a supplier audit according to, let's say, DORA, then you have to check what are the internal rules of this particular financial organization on how they want this supplier audit to be performed. You will also have to check what DORA itself says about audits of suppliers. And then you need to define the audit program. And there you will define the timing. So are you going to perform only one audit or series of smaller audits? This really depends on the size of the organization. You will also have to define the scope. So are you going to audit only one department or the whole organization? Again, this also depends on what is the scope of the implementation for internal audit, or what is the scope of the agreement with the supplier. You will also have to define what are the criteria. So the criteria are basically what you are auditing against. Are you auditing against the standard? Are you auditing against, let's say, internal documentation? Are you auditing against some security specifications in the agreement, and so on? You will also have to define what is the audit method. Typically, there are three audit methods that are used. So examining documents and records, personal observation, and also interviews with employees. In some cases, if you really want to go more technical, then you will also use some particular tools where you want to analyze the technology or the information systems that a company is using. In this program, you also have to define the responsibilities. So if there are more people in the audit team, who is the team leader? Also, to whom the audit results will be reported. Potentially also, what are the responsible people in each of these departments or companies that need to be audited, and so on. And then the next step is to do this document review. So basically, this is where you actually review the whole documentation of the company that you're auditing to make sure that this documentation actually complies with whatever criteria you have set in your audit program, so that you're aware of any potential gaps if something is missing. So for example, if you're auditing against ISO 27001, if the company has not written the statement of applicability, this would then be major nonconformity, because this document is mandatory according to ISO 27001. This document review also serves that you as an auditor get to know a client very good, because this is the way for you actually to understand all of their processes, responsibilities, technologies they're using, and so on, because this is crucial for the next step, and this is preparing the checklist. So in this audit checklist, you actually list all of the items that you should go through, so that once you start the audit, you are not forgetting anything important. And typically auditors are also using this checklist not only as a reminder, but also as a place where you actually write down all the audit findings. So for example, if you're checking if the backup has been performed according to a certain backup policy, then you can say in the audit finding that you have checked a particular system and that you have found this and this evidence. Because if you have this kind of a systematic way of recording all the evidence, then creating a final report will be much easier. And then the next step is really to perform this main audit, where you'll use all of the methods that you have specified in the audit program. So again, typically you will read all the documents and records that are needed for you to find evidence that this particular organization is complying with whatever criteria are defined. You will also do this personal observation, meaning that you will walk around the facilities and see if everything is in place. So for example, let's say that the company needs to install security cameras, then you can actually walk around this facility and see if this is really there where it should be. And finally, the third way to find evidence is by interviewing employees. And this is usually the most powerful way to collect evidence, because this is where you actually get a very clear clue on what is good in a company or what is not so good. And by the way, if you go for any of these internal auditor or lead auditor courses, then you will learn about these auditing techniques in much more detail. And then after you complete your audit, you have to write an audit report where you specify, is organization compliant with the criteria that you have set? So again, this could be a standard or something else. And you also have to specify non-conformities if there are any. You might also specify some kind of observations where you suggest potential improvements to whatever they're doing, even though they're already fully compliant, but still some things can be done in a better way. And then after you send this report, and after this organization actually makes all the corrections based on these non-conformities, then you have to do a follow-up where you check if this organization has really corrected everything and closed all of these non-conformities. Okay, hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions around how to organize an audit project, and I'll answer as soon as I can. And here are a couple of materials that can help you learn more about auditing, and you'll find the links below the video. So first of all, there is this advanced course for consultants where I explain some advanced techniques on how to be a successful consultant, including this lesson where I explain what are the business opportunities for these continuous work for clients. Second, you'll see this Secure and Simple podcast. This is where I'm the host and I interview successful consultants. And what you will see is that actually some of these consultants are focusing primarily on doing the audits because they see the biggest opportunity in this kind of an activity. Then you'll also see links to these lead auditor and internal auditor courses on Advisera website for various standards, including ISO 27001, 9001, 14001, 42001, and so on. And you'll also see a link to an article about ISO 27001 internal audit where it describes in very detail on what you need to do as part of each of these steps that I also describe in the video. Okay, and the next lesson in this beginner's course will be about how to prepare a client for an ISO certification. So what are all the steps that you have to do to actually make sure that your client passes the certification audit. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel not to miss any of my new videos. And I publish videos about cybersecurity and compliance and governance every week. And thanks for watching.